I'm very excited about this next leg because we've been doing this tour for a long time now. It's almost 2 years, and it began in arenas, so huge arenas. But as it went on, I realised that it was evolving and the ideas that I talked about were getting more and more interesting. And I thought, actually, I'm enjoying it more in smaller theatres, beautiful theatres like this, where we can discuss the deepest questions. I mean, I'm asking questions such as, what is the nature of space and time? What happens if you fall into a black hole? How did the universe begin? Why is the universe built in a way that allows life to exist? These are deep questions. We don't have the answers to all of them, by the way. But it's interesting to me that in the last few years, particularly through the study of black holes, we've begun to be forced to ask questions about the nature of space and time. So we're beginning to talk about atoms of space and atoms of time. And that surely we need to understand those things if we're going to understand the origin of time, if indeed the universe had an origin. So really, I do say though, it's a disclaimer for everybody who might buy tickets. I don't know the answers to all of these questions. If I knew the answer to the meaning of existence, then the tickets would be more expensive. But what I hope is that I give you a snapshot of the current scientific framework within which we're beginning to try to answer these deepest of questions. Spectacular, terrifying, interesting. On Earth, I'd love to do the show in the Antarctic. I've never been to Antarctica, and I'd love to do this at the South Pole, because that would be, a remarkable thing to do. But I'd also, you're right. I mean, if you said, well, you could do it on the moon. Wouldn't that be fantastic? So, because we have images, it's one of my favourite images of Earth rising over the surface of the moon. It's one of the images that opens the show, and it's actually a graphical representation of, I think, probably the most famous image taken from space, which is Earthrise, Christmas Eve 1968 from Apollo 8. My first Christmas Eve actually on Earth. And it's this beautiful image of the fragile crescent Earth rising above the desolate lunar surface. And so that image is central to the show. It's right up front. So wouldn't it be great for me not to have that on a screen, but behind me, right, the Earth rising over the surface of the moon? That would be cool. If I could have the answer to one question, and it's a question that I think we might get the answer to. So I'm going to give you two answers. One is one that I think we might answer in the next few years, maybe, or decades, and one that's a bit more difficult. The one I think we might answer is, are we alone in the universe? It's a very deep question. And you might say, well, the universe is vast and enormous, so surely there's life out there beyond Earth. But we don't know. We haven't found any. But we have a series of missions at the moment on the surface of Mars. One spacecraft on the way to Jupiter's moon Europa, and one about to be launched. And so we're beginning to explore in ever more depth places in the solar system where we think the conditions may be currently. Let me say that a bit differently. You can pick it up, can't you? So we're beginning to explore places in the solar system now where we think the conditions might be supportive of the origin of life, maybe in the past, or maybe possibly now. Jupiter's moon Europa being one of them, Saturn's moon Enceladus being another one, and of course Mars. So I think, it's just, I don't know, but it's possible within the next 10 or 20 years that we might find microbes subsurface on Mars. And I would love to know that, because that would be the answer. Then we are not alone in the universe. The more difficult question that I'd love to know the answer to is whether the Big Bang was the origin of the universe, in the sense that that's a place where time began. Or if not, then what happened before the Big Bang, And was there in some sense some mother of all big bangs that began the whole thing? Or is the universe eternal into the past as well as the future? So I'd love to know that. I think Einstein, for most of his life, if not all his life, felt that it would have been more natural for the universe to be eternal. Because then you don't have to answer this question about, well, why did it begin? What does it mean for a universe to begin? So I think, maybe I'm with Einstein on this one. It would be somehow neater if the universe had always existed in some form. But we do know that there was this thing, the Big Bang, when the universe was very hot and dense 13.8 billion years ago. So the question is, how did it get into that state? Did it exist before that and it turned or transformed into the universe that we see today? So these are deep questions that we have theories about, but it would be nice to begin to get more observational evidence and a deeper understanding. The most revolutionary theories in physics today, I think, are associated with black holes. And I'm going to talk about that in the show. It's one of my research interests, or my main research interest. So over the last decade or so, and actually stretching back to work that Stephen Hawking began in the 1970s, there have been really fundamental paradoxes about black holes. In particular, what happens to things that fall into them. So are they erased from the universe forever? Is it in accord with Einstein's theory? Is it that you go into the black hole, you can't ever get out, and you go in some sense to the end of time in the black hole? Or over unimaginable timescales, do you somehow get scrambled up and imprinted in the radiation that comes off the black hole, which is known as Hawking radiation? So could it possibly be that somehow everything that is you, if you fall in, comes out in some form? And that is it's been an interesting question for 50 years, and we're beginning to get answers now to that. And the current thinking is, well, I shouldn't give it away, should I? You should buy tickets. The thing about studying anything, and I always say this to any young people that I talk to, is that you have to study something that you're interested in. And that is the reason. So it can be very confusing sometimes. You can think, well, I should do this because I can get a job in this thing, or or whatever it is. But I really believe that if you study the thing that interests you, then you're most likely to be successful, and you will certainly be most likely to be happy. And so for me, it was astronomy. I was interested in questions about the stars, and how far away are the stars, and are there planets around all those stars, and how did all that get there, and why is the universe so vast? And these questions, I was always interested. And so ultimately I managed, and I was very lucky, to get a job in astronomy, physics, and then particle physics, which is the study of the building blocks of the universe. So I managed to get a job where I could explore fundamental questions and get paid for doing that, right? So I would say, for me, that's the beauty of science. It's true that if you study science, you'll get all sorts of skills which are extremely useful, and you could go into many other industries and you'll have a wonderful time. But that's not the reason I think that someone should do it. You should do it because you want to explore, spend your life exploring the deepest questions about nature.